Sit with me for a while. You've been running from something, haven't you? Maybe you don't call it fear. You might name it stress, pressure, uncertainty, exhaustion, anything that sounds more acceptable, more masculine, less vulnerable. But underneath all the words, the pulse is the same, fear. Every man feels it, though few will admit it out loud. We think fear is proof that we're failing, that if we were stronger, wiser, more disciplined, we wouldn't feel it. But that's not true. Fear doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human, alive, and standing at the edge of something that matters. Carl Jung understood this. He saw fear not as a flaw to eliminate, but as a messenger, the psyche's way of signaling that you are approaching the unknown. The unconscious doesn't speak English or logic. It speaks in emotion, in tension, in dreams, in fear. And when fear rises, it's not trying to destroy you. It's trying to get your attention. It's trying to teach you something your intellect has been too proud or too busy to notice. Today, I want to help you see fear clearly, what it really is, how it hides, and what happens when you stop running from it. We'll explore the childhood origins of fear, the adult disguises it wears, and the archetypal wisdom Jung left us for transforming it into awareness and strength. This isn't a lecture about courage or positive thinking. It's about contact, meeting fear directly enough to extract its instruction without collapsing under its weight. 1. What fear actually is and what it isn't. Fear is not your enemy, it's information. It's the nervous system's way of saying, something precious could be lost here. That's not an error, that's intelligence. Without fear, you wouldn't have boundaries, instincts, or caution. You'd walk into traffic, ignore betrayal, and mistake recklessness for bravery. Fear is the body's built-in guardian of life, but somewhere along the line, men were taught to equate fear with failure. Real men aren't afraid. Push through it. Don't be soft. So instead of listening to fear, we either repress it or overcompensate for it. Repression turns fear into anxiety, a vague, chronic hum that never turns off. Overcompensation turns it into arrogance, a false dominance meant to prove invulnerability. Both approaches miss the point. Fear's purpose is not to paralyze you or to inflate you. It's to orient you. It's there to focus your attention on what's real and what's at stake. What we call courage isn't the absence of fear. It's intimacy with it. It's knowing what fear is saying and responding consciously instead of reacting blindly. The paradox is that the man who denies fear becomes ruled by it. The man who admits fear gains choice. Jung said that we don't become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Fear is one of those dark figures. When you bring it into awareness, it stops whispering sabotage and starts speaking truth. Fear is the psyche's signal that growth is near. 2. How fear appears in ordinary life. Fear rarely arrives announcing itself. It wears costumes. In daily life, it hides inside irritation, perfectionism, cynicism, or control. A man might think he's angry at his partner for questioning him, but what he's really feeling is fear. Fear of inadequacy, fear of rejection, fear of not being the man he promised himself he'd become. Another man might seem chronically detached or cold, but beneath that armor lies fear of being consumed by emotion. Fear shows up in the morning when you check your phone before you even breathe, as if missing a message will end your belonging. It appears in meetings where you silence your truth because you fear being wrong. It appears when you criticize others more easily than you risk trying something new yourself. Fear isn't just in crisis moments. It's in the micro hesitations that keep you from full participation in life. There are 3 clear signs you're in fear's territory. First, disproportionate reactions, when your response is much bigger than the situation. Second, projection, when you accuse others of traits you secretly fear in yourself. And third, repetition, when the same painful scenario keeps returning, no matter the context. Fear doesn't vanish when ignored. It repeats until recognized. Fear has a strange loyalty to your evolution. It will keep knocking until you answer. 3. Origins and the boy who stayed. Every man's relationship to fear begins in childhood. The first lessons about fear rarely come through language. They come through the body, through the nervous system's early imprints of safety or danger. If you grew up in a household where vulnerability was punished, fear became shameful. If you grew up in chaos, fear became normal, a constant hum that taught you to scan every room before entering it. Many boys make unconscious contracts with themselves. If I act brave, they'll love me. If I never need help, I'll be safe. If I make them proud, I'll never be abandoned. These agreements shape adult behavior long after childhood ends. The man who prides himself on being fearless is often still that boy, terrified of showing need. The man who never slows down is often still that boy who learned that stillness equals danger. Inside most men is a frightened child who believes that fear must be hidden to earn love. That boy's strategies become the adult's armor. Workaholism, emotional detachment, overachievement. These are not moral failures. They are survival codes that worked once and now exhaust you. To grow, you must update the code. To meet fear as an adult, you must separate from the boy who felt unsafe and stand beside him instead of inside him. You don't banish him, you lead him. You say, I know you're scared, but I'm here now. We can handle this. That's what Jung called integration, not erasing the child, but including him in a larger, wiser self. Fear matures when the man who once ran from it learns to stand still with it. 4. Contact without collapse. Most men oscillate between two extremes, running from fear or drowning in it. Both are forms of avoidance. The first numbs, the second overwhelms. The middle path is contact, staying present enough to feel the fear without becoming it. Contact begins with recognition. You notice the tightening chest before you call it anxiety. You observe the hesitation before you label it weakness. You understand that the feeling belongs to you, but it's not the whole of you. Jung often described this as holding the tension of the opposites. In other words, you remain aware of both the fear and the observer of fear. This is difficult because it demands stillness, and stillness terrifies the ego. The ego survives by controlling outcomes, and fear threatens that control. But when you stop running, something unexpected happens. The fear begins to speak in full sentences. It tells you what it's protecting. It tells you what it needs. Sometimes it reveals that what you fear isn't danger, but expansion, the unfamiliar magnitude of your own potential. Contact doesn't require courage in the Hollywood sense. It requires honesty. The man who can admit to himself, I am afraid right now, without judgment, is already ahead of most of the world, because fear named is fear contained. Fear denied is fear multiplied. When you can sit with fear long enough to hear its message, you realize it's not a storm trying to drown you. It's a tide trying to carry you somewhere new. 5. Containment before expression. Containment is what allows fear to transform instead of erupt. To contain fear doesn't mean to suppress it. It means to hold it responsibly until it reveals its purpose. Most men were never taught containment. We were taught either to discharge emotion through aggression or to suffocate it through silence. Neither path builds strength. Containment feels like a vessel, strong, grounded, open. When you can feel fear in your body without trying to escape it, you become trustworthy to yourself. You prove that you can hold intensity without fragmenting. Jung compared this to the alchemical process of transformation: heat without explosion, pressure without shattering. Fear teaches containment by testing it. Every confrontation, every heartbreak, every unknown situation asks, can you stay conscious while feeling this? That's the real measure of maturity, not whether fear disappears, but whether presence survives it. Clean expression of fear looks like calm awareness, clear boundaries, and thoughtful action. Dirty expression looks like panic, manipulation, or avoidance disguised as control. The difference lies not in what you feel, but in how conscious you remain while feeling it. Containment turns fear from chaos into fuel. It becomes the quiet fire that keeps you alert, but not frantic, humble, but not small. 6. Consequences of avoidance versus integration. Avoidance is seductive because it works temporarily. It promises comfort, predictability, and the illusion of control. But what it actually creates is paralysis. The man who avoids fear becomes smaller every year, not because life shrinks, but because his tolerance for uncertainty does. He builds a narrow world around what he can manage and calls it safety. Avoidance costs relationships because people can sense when your presence disappears. It costs creativity because new ideas demand risk. It costs leadership because authority requires authenticity, and authenticity requires vulnerability. When you run from fear, you run from growth itself. Integration, on the other hand, enlarges you. When you include fear in your awareness, it stops being an adversary and becomes an advisor. It sharpens your attention. It humbles your ego. It teaches patience and prudence, the mature forms of caution. Every great decision in life involves some fear. The goal isn't to erase it, but to calibrate it. Too little fear and you become reckless. Too much fear and you become frozen. Integrated fear is balanced fear, the kind that informs but doesn't dominate. The man who integrates fear gains what Jung called a calm backbone. He doesn't pretend to be fearless. He becomes unshakably honest about what scares him, and that honesty itself becomes his strength. 7. Archetypal framing, the warrior and the king. In the language of archetypes, fear is the training ground of the warrior. The immature warrior seeks constant battle to prove his courage. The mature warrior recognizes that the greatest battle is inward, between impulse and awareness, between reaction and restraint. Fear tempers the warrior's edge. Without fear, aggression becomes mindless. With fear consciously integrated, it becomes precision. The mature warrior knows that courage isn't charging into chaos. It's entering it consciously, ready to learn. But there's another archetype shaped by fear, the king. The king archetype represents order, authority, and blessing. His shadow forms, the tyrant and the weakling, both misuse fear. The tyrant fears vulnerability and tries to dominate it in others. The weakling fears responsibility and avoids it altogether. Only the integrated king can hold fear without projecting it. He doesn't punish fear, he listens to it. He lets it inform his judgment without infecting his peace. When you can hold fear and still act with integrity, you embody both the warrior's courage and the king's composure. Together, they form a masculinity that neither postures nor retreats, a masculinity that is both firm and kind, awake and at ease. Fear becomes sacred when it serves wisdom instead of ego. 8. Responsibility and witness. Facing fear is a solitary act, but living with it wisely requires witness. You need others who have stood in their own terror and refused to look away. Witness turns isolation into belonging. When you speak your fear to someone who doesn't flinch, the shame around it begins to dissolve. That's why Jung valued dialogue, because words give form to what otherwise devours from within. Responsibility means you stop outsourcing your fear. You stop blaming society, parents, or fate for its existence. You accept it as part of your inheritance as a human being. Every man is afraid of something: loss, insignificance, intimacy, failure, death. The difference between the immature and the mature is not the presence of fear, but the relationship to it. The immature man denies fear and becomes possessed by it. The mature man acknowledges fear and becomes guided by it. Responsibility also means patience. Fear will not disappear overnight. It must be lived with, understood, integrated. Some days you'll manage it gracefully. Other days you'll stumble back into avoidance. That's fine. The work is not perfection. The work is reliability. Each time you face fear with awareness, you expand your capacity for life. Fear will visit again. It always does. It is the most faithful teacher you will ever have. When it knocks, it will not ask for permission. It will simply appear, in the tension before a choice, in the silence before you speak the truth, in the moment before you take a leap that might change everything. When that happens, remember, fear isn't here to stop you. It's here to shape you. It's showing you where your growth lives. It's revealing the edge between what's familiar and what's next. Stop running, turn around, face it, listen carefully. It's not shouting threats, it's whispering instructions. If you keep fleeing, you'll never hear them. Fear is not your punishment, it's your compass. It points toward the territory of transformation. The task is simple. When fear comes, don't ask to be saved from it. Ask what it wants you to learn, because once you learn it, you'll realize that the monster in the dark was never there to eat you. It was there to escort you into a fuller version of yourself. Be that man, not perfectly, reliably. Begin.